Coal, SA, stupid investment? And we, sleepwalking to climate catastrophe? Says UN Chief Guterres.
Here's a summary of the article.
In remarks delivered to The Economist's Sustainability Week via video link, Antonio Guterres sketched out a picture of where he felt the world stood when it came to tackling global warming. Keeping 1.5 alive requires a 45% reduction in global emissions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by mid-century, he said. Guterres' reference to 1.5 relates to the Paris Agreement's target of limiting global warming to well below 2, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius, compared to pre-industrial levels. According to present national commitments, global emissions are set to increase by almost 14% in the 2020s, he said. Last year alone, global energy-related CO2 emissions grew by 6% to their highest levels in history. Coal emissions have surged to record highs. We are sleepwalking to climate catastrophe. As major economies pursue an all-of-the-above strategy to replace Russian fossil fuels, short-term measures might create long-term fossil fuel dependence and close the window to 1.5 degrees. Countries could become so consumed by the immediate fossil fuel supply gap that they neglect or kneecap policies to cut fossil fuel use. And this is madness. Addiction to fossil fuels is mutually assured destruction.
This post received a score of 30,000, with an upvote ratio of 92%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
Coal is an investment in the same way that manufacturing cigarettes is an investment. A couple of economists showed a few years ago that burning coal literally destroys up to 5 times more economic value than the coal is worth itself, through property damage and increased healthcare costs, morbidity and mortality. This is before the climate impacts are even factored in.
Silly goose, this is for American businesses. They don't bear the costs of climate change, pollution, property damage, healthcare costs, morbidity and mortality. That's what the US taxpayers are for. US businesses aren't in the business of paying taxes and being held accountable for their mistakes. They get subsidizes, bailouts and let off the hook for the economy. Our one true capitalistic god.
Also German businesses. They just announced today that they will not continue using nuclear power despite the Russian situation. Instead, they're going to use coal instead.
That is so sad.
This was all known since 1960 or even earlier. And no one did anything. It's disgusting.
No one did anything is false. Fossil fuel execs killed their own research and paid for propagandists and politicians that was in line with their ideology of avarice as God.
Cockwatch if you want the details.
But a lot of rich people will become marginally more rich, so we can. Stop.
We've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas.
We haven't asked Gene Krupa yet to go boom boom bam bam boom boom bam bam bam.
Stupid doesn't convey the disastrous consequences that are associated with mining and burning coal. It releases more methane than oil and gas drilling combined, and the resulting waste from burning coal has more radioactive material than the waste from nuclear plants.
To be clear, nuclear waste is definitely more radioactive than coal waste. The difference is in nuclear facilities it is much better contained. Fly ash from burning coal releases 100 times more radiation into the surrounding environment than a nuclear plant producing the same amount of energy.
Guess Clean Harbors forgot to issue that PPE every time I spent a week at a coal plant and sucking up fly ash.
It's above background levels, but it's many times less than normal yearly exposure. The problems I suppose would be if it starts to accumulate in the environment, food chain. Which is not being monitored, so who knows? Comparing it to nuclear waste is probably somewhat alarmist.
Greater than comparing it to nuclear waste is probably somewhat alarmist. When some of the nuclear plants opened, people were worried that their house was nearby and following the near disaster of the, now rebranded, Sellafield, and so a comparison was made. The exhaust from a coal-fired power plant is more radioactive than being downwind from a nuclear power plant. That isn't to say the radioactive waste is comparable to coal, that's an apples to oranges comparison. But the emissions given off into the atmosphere are so much more tightly controlled around a modern nuclear plant so as to cause very little concern. Modern buildings in high radon areas are often built with a radon-proof membrane around the base of the building.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.